Welcome back. Pay to play, a statewide ban, was put into effect just last year, which means businesses in the Garden State are forbidden to make political campaign contributions in return for no-bid contracts. Well, now a new rule by the Election Law Enforcement Commission is forcing members of nonprofit groups to disclose their donations. And some say it's simply opening the books, but others say it's opening up a whole new can of worms. And joining me now are Linda Zippo, Executive Director of the Center for Nonprofits, and Joseph Marbach, Acting Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and Professor of Political Science at Seton Hall. Thanks both for joining us. And I'll ask you, Linda, explain a little bit for people who don't really understand the subtleties of the rule, what it involves.
Essentially, this latest wave of the disclosure regulations requires anybody receiving more than $50,000 in state, local, or county government contracts in New Jersey to submit reports to the Election Law Enforcement Commission regarding the campaign contributions that the organization made, as well as its board members, officers, and their respective spouses. And this applies also on the county and local level for contracts in excess of $17,500.
Well, I think a lot of people would ask, why is that a bad thing?
It's not, except for charitable organizations who are already prohibited legally from making institutional campaign contributions. For those organizations, it's critically important to maintain the perception and the reality of a nonpartisan status. The effect of this by artificially linking the contributions of board members, which are made privately, independently, and kept very separate from the organization, is going to create this artificial image, inaccurate image, that the organization itself is engaged in partisan activities.
And so you would think that it would be more difficult then to have people give their time to the board of a nonprofit if they feel like they'd be under more scrutiny than normal?
The problem with the board members is, unlike other entities, board members of nonprofits aren't paid. They have nothing to gain financially from a contract that's awarded to a nonprofit. But all of a sudden, the end result of these regulations is to encourage the public to assume that there's a connection between the two, when in the case of charities, there isn't.
Well, Joe, can we ever say that that is the case, that we can be confident that most nonprofits are completely nonpartisan?
Well, in fact, they are because of their activities, and if they engage in political activities, they would lose their nonprofit status. The other aspect of this law that needs to also be identified is that these board members who make political contributions already are on the records. So this is really expanding the public disclosure to a certain extent, and it puts a little bit of the onus on some of the charitable organizations to collect this information, but it is information that is readily available, and we should expect, in the instance of full disclosure, to see charitable organizations do this to a certain extent. I think it's also a reflection of a couple of bad apples spoiling it, or rotten apples spoiling it. For those in South Jersey that know about Philadelphia politics, Vince Fumo in the state legislature was funneling money to a charitable organization. We have UMDNJ and the shenanigans going on there. I think that's really a kind of a reflection of what's going on to some extent.
And I think that if there is sort of that possibility open, you know, there is the idea that there are politicians down the road who could be thinking to funnel money to charities or do that sort of thing. So again, this law might be worthy.
Well, I think that the difference, though, is there's a difference between a real conflict of interest, which is what we're talking about in the case of UMDNJ and some of the other instances that were just referred to, and the false impression or the distortion of reality. If the goal behind pay to play is to present an accurate picture of the influence of money in contracting, what's going to happen with this is that it's going to distort that record and imply that charities are engaged in this when it's not really happening. The other problem, of course, is that the board members, first of all, are hard to come by. It's hard enough to recruit board members. This is going to make it harder. But it's also very common for people to serve on more than one board at a time. Every single charity is going to have to report and repackage, basically, information that's already available. You can go on the Election Law Enforcement Commission website and find information about every individual contribution that's been made. For charities to have to repackage this and report it for every board member, every officer, their respective spouses, and it's going to be duplicated over and over again by every charity on whose board an individual serves, and then multiply that by the number of charities with contracts, and you've got a real problem with duplication, over-reporting, and information that's going to be
That would seem,
really
though, that it
meaningless.
would be an open process in state government, which is what we've been asking for in New Jersey in a long time. So again, isn't that what we want?
I would think so. Part of the problem also is the way that these records are kept and maintained. One solution might simply be everybody who gives political contributions should also list, are you a member of a charitable organization? Are you on the board? Is your spouse on the board? If we had another column, people could then get that information and collate it based on what's available with the public records. So it may be something that ELEC has to go back and look at. How are we going to collect this information? How do we best distribute it and present it? And that's really been one of the criticisms against ELEC, that the information they collect is not readily available to be scrutinized.
And make it something smart for the people of New Jersey. Thank you both so much for joining us again. And to learn more about the issues and also the top news stories in your community, you can log on to my9ny.com. That's all the time we have for today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week on New Jersey Now.